A child's bond with their father is supposed to be unbreakable. However, sometimes the bond can take a turn for the worse. Parricide is the term used to refer to the killing of one's own parents. Within parricide, patricide is used to refer to the killing of one's father. Today, we'll be discussing the case of a loving father, Terry King, murdered by his sons, Derek and Alex. For our first case in this series, we're going all the way to Cantonment, a rural suburb located in Escambia County, Florida. Terry King and Kelly Marino met back in 1985, just a young couple in love at the time. Although they never found themselves getting married, they soon ended up having their first child, Derek, in 1988. Although life wasn't perfect for the family, they were happy to have their second child, Alex, just 1 year later in 1989. As life continued on, the boys were quickly growing, and Kelly became pregnant again, but this time wasn't such a happy miracle for the family. Kelly gave birth to a set of twin boys sometime between 1990 and 1993. Although not Terry's, the couple stayed together and decided to continue to raise all 4 children as a family. That is, until sometime in 1994. Only 9 years after Terry and Kelly had first met, Kelly started to change, and for the worse. She started experimenting with drugs and expressed feelings often about being extremely overwhelmed with the daunting responsibilities of motherhood. Soon after these feelings began, she made a choice to leave, and Terry was left as a single parent to 4 children. Terry was unable to financially take care of all 4 children. The children were removed from his custody in 1994, at least for the time being, till Terry could get a better paying job. Derek moved in with his high school principal's family, the Lays, and Alex was sent to a foster family. Some years after moving into foster care, it wasn't working out for Alex. He was returned to his father's care. We aren't sure exactly why Alex moved back, but Alex seemed to be happier living with his dad. That is, until Derek moved back. Following the split of his parents and moving in with the Lay family, Derek started becoming more troubled. He started getting into drugs, particularly sniffing lighter fluid, stealing beer, and being more disruptive. He also found out around this time that he had a fascination with fire. All of these problems seem to be indications of attention-seeking actions. It is notable that Derek seemed to get a triggered aggression when he would listen to music. The Lay family started to take notice of Derek's action, and decided for their family's safety, it'd be best if Derek moved back in with his dad, which, for them, was probably a good idea in the end. Derek resented his father. Not only did he hate that he had to live in a rural area, but he also hated having to live by his dad's strict rules.
We have no indication of any kind of abuse. For all the practical purposes of what we've been able to determine, Terry was a responsible father who tried to take care of his sons as best he could.
Although Terry never physically abused the children specifically said that they had felt threatened by what was described as their father's oppressive stare-downs. Another note in this case is that Terry also took Derek off of Ritalin, which is a medicine prescribed to help manage ADHD, which Derek had been taking for years. On the outside, the move seemed to be a positive thing for Derek, but inside, his resentment towards his father continued to spread like wildfire. Another key person in this case is Rick Chavis. Rick and Terry had been friends for several years, so both Alex and Derek had gotten to know him pretty well. A little too well, to the point where Rick would sometimes pick the boys up from school. Derek and Alex would sometimes even hang out at Rick's house, especially because he allowed them to watch TV and play video games. However, in November, the same month that Terry was murdered, Terry started to get the feeling that the kids were getting too close to Rick and spending too much time with him, so he cut the boys off from seeing him. Noticing Derek's growing aggression, Terry removed the stereo and the TV from the house, hoping that this would help, but this only ended up making things worse. On November 16th, only 10 days before the gruesome murder, Alex and Derek ran away from home. On November 26, 2001, firefighters from Escambia County arrived at a small community in response to a house fire call. Soon after arriving, they rushed into the house, only to find one of the occupants, Terry King, had appeared to succumb from the flames on the couch. At least that's what they thought, but after examination of his body, it was discovered that he had died from blunt force trauma to his head. He had been hit so many times in the head with a blunt object that his skull had been cracked in half and his face had been smashed in. By the early morning of the 28th, a team of homicide investigators was already on the scene, one of them being Detective John Sanderson. Neighbors soon told John that Terry had two young sons who lived with him, Alex and Derek. John was told that Alex had moved in during the previous summer, but Derek had only been living there for a few weeks up until this point. However, both of the boys were missing. At this point in the investigation, the name Rick Chavis kept coming up from family and friends. Detective Sanderson was anxiously waiting to interview him, find out if there was any connection to the murders. One thing that kept coming up was red flags about Chavis potentially having a relationship with the young boy Alex. The same day that the investigation began, the search for the boys came to an end, when Chavis brought the boys into the police station, claiming to have found them in Santa Rosa. This was weird and later was investigated more. However, the boys claimed to have been hiding in the forest for the last day. Although the brothers were interviewed separately, the circumstances surrounding the night were clear. Terry King was murdered by his sons. During the interview at the police station, Alex had claimed that it was his idea to kill their father, and Derek was the one who had acted on it. According to Derek, he waited until his father fell asleep on the couch, picked up an aluminum baseball bat, and bashed Terry in the head 10 times. He had recalled that the only sound he heard his father make was a gurgling. The boys then freaked out, and Derek set fire to the house in an attempt to conceal the murder. One of the questions on everyone's minds by this point was, why did the boys truly decide to kill their father if he wasn't abusive? Their reasoning was that they were scared their dad was going to punish them for running away, almost as if implying he was abusive. Alex had made it clear that Derek needed to protect him because he was the older brother. Although they admit that their dad never hit them, they did say he would sometimes push them, but what they feared the most were the times he would make them sit in a room while he stared at them. This did not necessarily make sense to the investigators, because how could two young boys do this all by themselves? They knew they had to question Rick Chavis, especially after finding out that he was a convicted pedophile. After interviewing Rick more than 9 times, they found out what Rick had really claimed happened. He says that Alex had called him the night of the murder, mumbling and freaking out. He immediately went and picked them up, took them to his house, and cleaned their bloody clothes. They also found out that the voicemail Alex left Rick was faked by all 3 of them. The detectives found out around this time that Rick had feelings for Alex, and Alex had reciprocated those feelings. Both Derek and Alex were soon charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, and were placed in a juvenile detention center. Since the laws in Florida allow children to be charged as adults, they were sentenced as adults and immediately sent to the adult county jail to await trial. Rick Chavis was soon taken in after being interviewed, and was being held at the same jail on a $50,000 bond. Many of the witnesses that testified during the Chavis trial also testified at the brothers' trial, including the Lay family. When Alex was testifying for Rick's trial, he answered the questions about Rick much more in depth than he did in his own defense. He talked much more openly about his sexual relationship with Rick, and even said that he loved Rick.
Alex, you're charged with first-degree murder, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
And I want you to know, I want the jury to know, that I'm giving you what's called use immunity. That means that you can tell the truth here today, you can testify, and whatever you say here today can't be used against you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Because you understand that you have a right not to testify.
Yes, sir.
But since I'm giving you immunity, use immunity, you have to testify. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
And you have to testify truthfully. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Rick Chavis?
Yes, sir.
You see him in his courtroom?
Yes, sir.
You point to him, describe him.
He's wearing gray suit, white shirt.
How long have you known him?
I don't know, about 3 years, I think.
How did you meet him?
My dad introduced him to me.
Was your dad Terry King?
Yes, sir.
Now, you have a brother named Derek King?
Yes, sir.
For several years, did Derek live somewhere else?
Yes, sir.
Was it just you and your dad?
For a while.
Back in October of last year, at the end of September, did Derek come back to live with you and your dad?
Yes, sir.
Where were y'all living?
In Cantonment.
Was it on Muskogee Road?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you develop a relationship with Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
Did you at some point believe that you were in love with Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
Did you write some notes and letters about how you felt about Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you some marked states exhibit number 10 for identification purposes. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it says AK and RC, is that right?
Yes, sir.
What does the AK stand for?
Alex King.
What does the RC stand for?
Rick Chavis.
It's time to take off from exhibit 10 in evidence. No objection.
What is that marked as, Mr.
10.
Ray? Number 10?
10.
No objection. That's a letter, a note, or something?
Yes.
Was it a photocopy of the original?
This is a photocopy.
Okay. No objections admitted?
No objection.
Okay.
Alex, let me show you state's exhibit number 9. Did you write this?
Yes, sir.
What does it say?
I love you, Rick.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 11. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
What does it say?
Alex David King loves Ricky Marvin Chavis so much, always and forever.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 12. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 13. Is this your handwriting?
No, sir.
Okay, I will set that aside. Let me show you state's exhibit number 14. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 15. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 16. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
And this is a letter addressed to Terry. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Who is Terry in this letter?
My dad.
Terry King?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you state's exhibit number 8. Is this your handwriting?
Yes, sir.
One major thing was different from his original statement, though, and that was that he said that it wasn't Derek who delivered the final blow, but that it was Rick. Rick had put the two boys in the car and went back into the house to do the murder. Rick then convinced the boys to take the blame since they would get off with self-defense, being children. When asked why Alex's story had changed, He mentioned that Derek and him kept rehearsing the story they were going to tell, and in a way, that made sure Rick did not get in trouble. Alex stated during court, "He said he had killed my dad to protect us." And later, Alex also stated, he was saying that if we took the blame, we would get off on self-defense because we were juveniles. He then said that only after being in jail did he come to the realization that he didn't want to spend the rest of his life behind bars. After the jury deliberated for only 2 days, they came to a verdict. The court found the 2 boys guilty of second-degree murder with a deadly weapon and arson. The 2 boys were looking at 22 years to life for the murder and 30 years for the arson. Rick's trial revolved around the fact that the boys were charged with the murders. After all was said and done, he was found not guilty of the murder because of the lack of evidence. Because prosecutors provided conflicting physical evidence at both of the trials, and the judge had felt like the boys didn't get a fair trial, the judge ordered the defense lawyers and the prosecutors come to a mediated agreement. If they were unable to come to an agreement, the verdict would be thrown out and the boys would be retried. On November 14, 2002, almost a year to the date of the murder, a mediated agreement was reached. Alex and Derek pled guilty to third-degree murder and arson and had to tell the truth about what happened. Derek and Alex admitted that their original story was true and they had lied during Rick's trial. They had murdered their father. The judge sentenced Derek to 8 years and Alex to 7 years, plus credit for time served. Although Rick Chavis was acquitted for the murder, he still faced several other charges, including the kidnapping and molestation of Alex. Both of these he was found not guilty, but he was found guilty of false imprisonment and was sentenced to 5 years. He was also later found guilty of tampering with evidence and as an accessory after the fact to murder, for which he received a total of 35 years. His sentences run concurrently and he will likely be released in 2028. After serving their sentences, Alex was released in 2008 and Derek was released in 2009.
Given how we last left off in the eyes of the public, we just felt they deserved more, a follow-up to know that all of their faith and their hope and goodwill weren't wasted on us. Like my brother, I've spent many years inside of a program that is solely designed for therapy and rehabilitation.
What would you say to the people who say, once a murderer, always a murderer?
To be fair to those people, we did make a mistake. However, there are a select few individuals who decide to have faith and just blindly hope in something. Catherine Medico,
right,
who I now call Mother, is a prime example of that, inviting both of us into her family. And we just want to show by living our lives as productive citizens that that's not a mistake. That even though people do make mistakes, even though they make errors, that there is still hope.